Hello and welcome to Newsfire. I'm Ayza Omar. Now, Pakistan challenges India's ineligibility as a permanent or non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Munir Akram, he said that the size and power of a state does not in itself qualify it for a permanent membership of the Council. And he also said that India is blatantly violating UN resolutions with its draconian lockdown of Jammu and Kashmir. He said this while addressing the 193-member General Assembly during the debate on the reforms to be ushered into the UN Security Council on Tuesday. Now, relationship between the two nuclear-armed states have been fraught with tensions, especially after August 5th this year, when Prime Minister Modi's government revoked the Article 370 that gave the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir some autonomy. Now, since then, there's been a complete communication lockdown and harsh curfews, bringing normal life routines to a grinding halt for 8 million Kashmiris. Objective and impartial humanitarian groups and observers have not been allowed access by the Indian government, who continues to call the situation on the ground as normal. Meanwhile, in the valley, an anonymous police official has confirmed 2 people have been killed in suspected rebel grenade attacks in which a government official and a member of the village council were killed. In the Kashmir's Anantnag district, another grenade attack also has taken place in the past 48 hours in this Jammu and Kashmir area, which the Indian government again says is very normal, and there is still no access to journalists from outside to report on these incidents. So whatever we're getting from those who have managed to get in and monitor the situation. Now, we're going to not only discuss the situation in Jammu and Kashmir with this continuing lockdown. It's been over 3 months now, but also to understand better what Pakistan's argument is on India's ineligibility as a UNSC member. What exactly is India hoping to achieve by securing a permanent membership seat in the UNSC? So without further ado, let me introduce who we have with us. We have Ambassador Munir Akram, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, joining us all the way from New York. And also we have from Lahore, analyst Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, joining us from here in Lahore. So let's first expand a little on how the response was when you addressed the General Assembly, talking about why India was the last state who should be seeking this permanent membership in terms of their credibility at a time where the entire world is condemning what they are unfolding on these 8 million Kashmiris.
Well, I suppose the response will come in the negotiations, but it was important to state the case that India has been propagating its requirement for a permanent seat, and we feel that it is not eligible because of its violations of the Security Council resolutions and its human rights record, its policies against its own minorities, for several series of reasons. A country which violates the Charter, which violates the resolution of the Security Council, should not be eligible. And we believe that our argument is sound, and it should have resonance within the membership of the United Nations.
And Ambassador, is this the first instance where Pakistan has stood up in India's qualifications for the membership of the UNSC? I mean, like you mentioned yourself, that this has been an ongoing effort for India.
Yes, we have questioned India's eligibility. We've questioned the need for permanent members, new permanent members. We've questioned India's eligibility on the basis of violations of Security Council resolutions, which has been ongoing. But at this stage, India is certainly pursuing a horrendous policy of a reign of terror in occupied Kashmir, and the policies of this present government in New Delhi are such that it hardly behoves the international community to reward them with a permanent seat on the council. And that argument, that illustration of the policies of this government is necessary at this time to show the world that India is nowhere near having the qualifications to promote peace and security through permanent membership or non-permanent membership in the Security Council.
All right, let's get you in, Lieutenant General. I'm eager to hear your opinion also. I mean, one of the arguments that the Indian government gave was that why they should have a claim of this membership seat is that India represents 1/6 of the global population, was one one of the reasons they gave, along with many other in terms of how they see India's stance in critical global issues and taking the side of those who are oppressed and who need a voice. What's your take on how they're going to go about pleading their case in the UNSC?
Frankly speaking, I think if I were to make any decision, I would first expel India from the United Nations because what it has done is not only in Kashmir you're talking about, it's crime against humanity, and this pales the so-called what happened to the Jews way back in the 40s, last century. I think besides Kashmir, what is happening there, and the ambassador was very right, and he pointed that out to the people concerned there. We must also look at what has happened in Assam. The Muslims who are, baited into coming from Bengal, East Bengal at that time, East Pakistan, and they were used against Pakistan. They're the people, their families, they have been disenfranchised just one order. I mean, they have no country anymore. Muslims all around, all through India, they are suffering. They are the second largest population group in India. I have yet to find a Muslim representing at the top level in India. BJP hasn't awarded a single ticket to any Muslims who could win a seat to become the part of their Lok Sabha. So this kind of exclusive kind of a thought process, where they feel that Hindutva, that they have the right to rule not only within and discriminate against all the minorities. And I've heard, frankly, people telling me that they hate Pakistan and they hate Muslims. So this kind of a mindset, you want that to go and make into the international decision-making body, which by the way, according to bypass process, which has in any outlet is utility. That is what I think, because UNSC, other than serving the interest of America at this point in time and previously the two blocks that we had, it has done very little to promote peace and tranquility in the world.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. We want to get, coming back to you, Ambassador, let's talk a little about what this process itself will entail, how long it will go ahead. I mean, this is something, the reforms of the UN Security Council, this has been going on since 2009, at least in terms of the debate going on how these reforms should take place, especially in key areas like veto and representation of regions. So what is the expected next step?
Well, this process has been going on actually since the late 1990s. Not 2009. The process came to a head in 2005 when a resolution was presented by the so-called Group of Four, which includes Japan, Brazil, India, and Germany. And they presented a proposal which would have the General Assembly endorse their permanent membership. Pakistan, together with Italy and a number of other countries which are called the Uniting for Consensus group, we mobilized a number of countries and we blocked that move in 2005. Now, since then, the process has gone into consultations and negotiations where consensus agreement has not been possible because of the intransigent and inflexible stance that the Group of Four have taken, insisting upon permanent membership. And this is contrary to the interests of all other members of the United Nations. We don't need 4 more permanent members in the Security Council. The Security Council is, as it is, finds it difficult to work since it has 5 veto-wielding members. And to add 4 more or 6 more is going to complicate the Council's work further. So the process of consultation is difficult. The other side, the group of four, have shown no flexibility. And therefore, these negotiations are going on, and they will go on this year. And we will continue to insist on the position that we have taken. And we hope that if reform is to take place, we should just expand the non-permanent members. That will balance the power of the permanent members. It will be more democratic. It will be more equitable for all countries, not only for some countries. And
you've also talked about how representation of certain areas is missing, like Africa. You proposed that they deserved representation in the forum also.
Right. So Africa, in the present 15-member council, Africa has 3 seats, but they are all non-permanent members. The Africans argue that China is a permanent member from Asia, and all other regions have a permanent member. Of course, Latin America doesn't have a permanent member. Europe has 2 permanent members. The Americas have 1. Russia is from Eastern Europe. So it's a question of, if Africa wants to be equalized with other regions, then they will claim 2 permanent members as such. But the Africans are claiming the seats for Africa, not for a specific country. Although there are ambitions from Nigeria, South Africa to be the nominees of Africa, they have not agreed as to who will represent. We think they will rotate on the African seats, and that's fine with us.
Okay, so Lieutenant General, coming back to the point you touched upon here, I want to also highlight what's been making the news is the Indian Consul General in the United States, when he said in a private sort of setting where the Israeli model is what they're looking to implement in Kashmir, and actually questioned why the government hadn't gone about doing this already. And he's talking about here the Hindu pundits who had a mass exodus in the 90s from the besieged valley, and blaming that on the Kashmiris, the militants, and saying that essentially endorsing the settlers, this sort of policy of the Israelis, the snatching away of land from those who rightfully owned it. I mean, when this kind of conversation is going in parallel to a General Assembly session where they're hearing why India should have a more important role in the UNSC, does it concern you that maybe the larger narrative of the Modi government is, successfully getting sort of sidelined here and not getting the attention it deserves?
Frankly, I mean, the international community seems deaf and dumb as to what has been going on in Kashmir, not since today. I mean, since 5th August, but since the last 2 decades, 3 decades, in fact. And this kind of program is going on, like it was tried for the last, I think, over 15 years in Kashmir. There are so many casualties. Even recently, Indian government had prepared concentration camps, like which we found in Germany in Second World War. And they have abducted, forcibly taken away able-bodied Kashmiri Muslims, and they're trying to so-called, re-educate them and force them into submission. And that is what they're trying right here. The pundits who left, they left on their own accord. Nobody forced them out. Nobody attacked the freedom fighters. Never went after the Kashmiri pundits or Kashmiri non-Muslims. They were fighting exactly what is happening right now. They're fighting the Indian army then, and they're fighting the Indian army now. Pundits left on their own, and the total strength that India talks about at that point in time was, I recall very correctly, was something between 50,000 to 100,000. Now they want to bring back 10 times, 15 times, 20 times more. They are trying to change the total complexion of Kashmir. They have already bifurcated Ladakh away, which also has, by the way, a lot of Muslims there. And they are now concentrating in depopulating the valley from Muslims. How can the international community not only be concerned with this, but forcing India to back out of it? They're not doing it because, and that is exactly the reason why I said that UNSC has no role to play anymore. Frankly, because this is where the interests collide. The the interest of United States of America, the interest of Great Britain, France, and in India. They are now at this point in time on one table.
Let's Lieutenant General, ask Ambassador this, because we're running out of time. We've just got the last minute here. Ambassador, this stance that the international community, which the General also said, seems to have gone deaf and blind to what is unfolding here on 8 million people. Not saying that this is the only case where the oppressed are going unnoticed in the world today, but is this a debate, a conversation that even gets touched upon now when conversations over memberships or reforms in the UN take place?
Well, let me just first recall that this particular government of India, led by the BJP RSS, has described its policy in Kashmir as the imposition of the final solution. So it is also ironic that now the Consul General speaks of the Israeli model, and there's a double irony in that is self-evident. The final solution was imposed on the Jews, and now, of course, Israel is doing its own thing in the occupied territories. India is doing much worse. India is going to try and completely change the demography of occupied Kashmir in order to make it a Hindu majority. This will be tantamount to genocide. And we have to be aware of that. As far as the international community is concerned, I think there is a heightened awareness of what's happening. We have had a Security Council meeting after 50 years. The Security Council is being told about the situation by the Secretariat, by the UN Secretary General, by myself, by our delegation, and they are kept fully informed of what is happening. The silence in Kashmir is the silence of the graveyard. They have imposed a reign of terror. They don't allow any reportage from there. They don't allow anybody inside, and therefore there is no news. But the situation will erupt as soon as the Kashmiris become desperate, or when these measures are lifted. There will be a popular uprising, and Kashmir will be back on the front burner of every security agency and security policy maker in the world, because it is the most dangerous nuclear flashpoint in the world.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much. Munir Akram joining us, and Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, thank you for giving us your time. We've come to the point we're going to take a quick short break. We've been talking about Pakistan challenging India's ineligibility in the UNSC. We're going to take a break, come back and bring you an update on why the protests in Lebanon are now suddenly getting very violent. Welcome back. You're watching Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. Protests in Lebanon by the civil society against the ruling class for the 40-plus days that it's been taking place has been taking place pretty much peacefully. Protesters are demanding the overhaul of the government system, which they say has made to worsen sectarian divides in the diverse community. Demonstrators are also demanding accountability for years of mismanagement and corruption by the government. But since Sunday, what we've seen as largely peaceful protests have become quite violent, and sectarian tensions seem to be rising there. Instigated by supporters of Hezbollah, a political and militant group based in Lebanon, and Amal, also an Islamist political party. Both have been part of former Prime Minister Saad Hariri's government. To understand the situation, to better get a grip of who is behind and what is the purpose behind instigating these sectarian divides, which have so far in these protests been very peaceful, we'll be talking to our guest. Let me introduce who we have today. With us is Mr. Toni Nissi. He's the President of the Committee for the UNSCR Resolutions, also the Secretary General of the National Council for the Cedar Revolution. And he is joining us from Beirut. Also from Beirut is Mr. Van Meguerditchian. He is a Lebanese political activist and journalist right now sitting in the heart of Beirut in Martyrs Square. Welcome to both of you to Newswire. Mr. Van, let's start with you. You're sitting there right now from where all these protests have essentially begun over a month ago now. They've been largely peaceful. Now, with the reports coming in since Sunday that these violent clashes have been instigated by supporters of Hezbollah, Amal, tell us a little more how we can understand what kind of purpose they have and how are they instigating these sectarian divides, which have so far not propped up in the protests?
Well, to understand the situation right now, we need to understand what's going on behind me at the moment. What's going on behind me at the moment is, as you can see, we are on one of my sides. We're rebuilding the Phoenix that was threatened by strong winds, and behind the Phoenix, you can see the hand of the revolution that was destroyed, burned at least twice in the past month by violent protesters storming this street every now and then, sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning, that they completely burned the hand behind us. The protesters now, at this hour, it's noon in Beirut right now. They're trying to rebuild the Phoenix to sustain it against strong winds, and we're trying to stay, despite the weather, we're trying to stay on the streets. Despite the danger facing us.
There's a lot of sort of noise in the background. I can hear an ambulance siren. Tell us a little, are you safe where you're sitting right now? What's the atmosphere like?
Yes, it is safe right now. We are safe. The Lebanese army, the Lebanese security forces are surrounding the area, are surrounding Beirut. We are only meters away from the Lebanese parliament, which is over there. The police and the army presence is strong, but sometimes at night when the violent protesters are coming, they're even attacking the Lebanese army. They're even attacking the Lebanese security forces. But for this reason, there is more and more army and police presence in this neighborhood.
You keep referring to them as the violent protesters. Do we have any idea of their identity, who they are?
I don't really like to name them, but if you want to know, everybody around the world for the past 2 days saw the violent protesters with the flags of Hezbollah and the Amal movement, which is basically a little satellite party that is controlled by Hezbollah. They have taken to the streets with batons, rocks, stones to intimidate, terrorize women and children who have been on the streets singing, chanting for a better Lebanon, for a peaceful, modern Lebanon. They've been taking to the streets to destroy these hopes, to take them out of the streets so that they would take the streets again and they would take Lebanon back to where it was, back to the conditions that people were living in. Protesters have never referred to Hezbollah's arms, Hezbollah's militia organization, or anything of that sort. But it's surprising the way Hezbollah's militants and the leadership is reacting today, because it's as if when the protesters are criticizing and protesting against extremely difficult situation and extremely poor policies implemented in Lebanon, their reaction is as if Hezbollah itself is responsible. No one is saying Hezbollah alone is responsible, or no one is bringing Hezbollah into the matter. But Hezbollah's reaction is kind of telling everyone that they are actually responsible and they are happy with the situation.
So, Mr. Toni Nissi, let's get you on this. We've got pretty much an update, an idea of what's unfolding there in Martyrs Square in Beirut. You're also in Beirut. The kind of reaction that Hezbollah is showing, their supporters on the street, being named as the instigators perpetuating these sectarian tensions, which so far have not shown their ugly face in these protests, where all Lebanese have come forward as a united front, demanding the government be held accountable for the corruption, the mismanagement. So do you agree with this take that maybe it is them feeling, that Hezbollah feeling threatened at a time where they might just be seeing the end of their tenure?
Of course, you know that Hezbollah feels responsible because Hezbollah is in the government, Hezbollah is in the parliament, and the situation used to be since 1990 that give us our arms, we are going to keep our arms, and you are going to keep the corruption, and we are going to cover your corruption. So Hezbollah right now feels attacked by the protesters because actually Hezbollah is controlling the government. Hezbollah even is controlling the Speaker of the House and the Parliament. The Speaker of the House is the president of the Amal movement, who are protesting against the protesters every day. who are trying, to put them in fear to leave the streets. So if you look at the big map, if you look at the big image, geopolitics in Lebanon, you see that every demonstration in Lebanon against corruption, every demonstration in Lebanon to have a safe Lebanon, to have a sovereign Lebanon, a pluralist Lebanon, is 100% against Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is a militia having his weapons, his arms against the Lebanese will. So Hezbollah right now is feeling that he's losing control. The president, he considered the president, that he put the president in the presidential palace. Now all the protests are against the regime, all the protests are against corruption, are against the government, and they want to change the government to bring a technocrat government. This means they are refusing the control of Hezbollah on this country. So Hezbollah right now
is feeling threatened and feeling responsible. But tell me this, that right now the fear that some analysts are saying that this kind of protest movement was being seen in Lebanon as a successful, peaceful protest movement. But with the latest clashes in the past 3 nights, there are concerns that this is very quickly going to spin out of control into a sectarian conflict. Is this a valid concern?
Of course, Hezbollah right now was trying to see the enemy among the protesters. And actually, these protesters are normal people protesting because they want their country safe. Hezbollah is taking us to the next level. Now he's trying to transform the demonstration into sectarian ones. They are shouting Shia, Shia, which is the sect of Hezbollah. They are trying to say that Lebanon is divided in a sectarian way, and now he's putting a street in front and another street. As Van has said, nobody has ever mentioned this Hezbollah during the protesting, during the demonstration that has been taking the street during the last months. But actually, as I told you before, Hezbollah is the one responsible of all the corruption happening here, because he is supporting the people who are corrupt. He is in an equation saying that he keeps his arm and they keep the money. He is supporting them, and he is forbidding all the institutions in Lebanon to be able to take these guys to the court. So whatever it happens on the streets in Lebanon, Hezbollah is concerned, and he is all the time, wherever, if we mention him, so yes
you're saying basically they're targeting spots of the protesters where they know they can use those weak spots to derail them. Coming back to you, Van, the army you mentioned has been heavily present. How has the impression of the army been so far in this trial of sort of nerves that is taking place with protesters versus the ruling elite? Where do they stand in the hearts of the protesters?
It's a good question. Most of the Lebanese army personnel and the Lebanese security forces have stood by the protesters in so many places in the country. Wherever there are attacks, like yesterday in the heart of Lebanon's Baalbek, in the heart of Lebanon's Bekaa, when violent protesters attacked and destroyed speakers, attacked women and children and men who were protesting peacefully with Lebanese flags, the Lebanese army intervened to defend them. The same happened in Tripoli, in the north of Lebanon. The same happened in Beirut 2 nights ago on the highway, where there was literally a scene never seen before, where hundreds of violent protesters attacked with stones from 300 meters away and injured at least 40 people. The Lebanese army stood by us. The Lebanese army got hit by stones. The Lebanese security forces got hit by stones. But what they tell me, what they tell other journalists, is that they are not able to crack down, to stop these violent protesters from getting to us faster than they are doing. Is because their hands are tied. They want to appease the other side, and they don't want to give them a reason to attack the Lebanese state institutions more, because the other side, it seems the other side doesn't care at all about the Lebanese army or the Lebanese security forces. So it's a tricky situation here for the Lebanese army. They want to keep the streets safe. They want to ensure that the protesters have the right to protest, have the right to stay on the streets, but they are facing huge challenges to face the violent protesters now.
Okay, Toni, coming back to you, this concern, of course, will be amongst the protesters themselves. There are a lot of youngsters out there, there are a lot of women and their children taking part in these protests for the past 40-odd days, that now we're seeing an instigation of sectarian violence being perpetuated in peaceful protests. Is this going to have some kind of, you fear, maybe a dampening effect on the peaceful movement that is taking place right now, standing against the ruling class, the government?
You know, I get that the people in Lebanon are not in fear anymore, and actually they will not leave the streets until they reach their goals. And I believe that the Lebanese army and the Lebanese security forces are able to handle the situation. They are going to be able to protect the protesters. Yes, we have a feeling from day one, and I told you last time that we feel that it's going to be a long way, and maybe it's going to be harder on a daily basis. But we believe that this revolution will continue until it reaches its goals. And we count on the Lebanese army. And as I told you before, we count as well on the free world to help the Lebanese to reach their goals, because actually Hezbollah now is active on the ground. He is willing to smash the demonstrations. And we heard from several sources, especially it's been said clearly that the Iranians, they took the decision to smash the revolution in Lebanon, as in Iraq and as in Iran. We believe that I need to call all the free world from your screen to help us, to look at us and to support the free Lebanese who are protesting in peace, because they only want their rights in their country.
All right, Toni, we hear you loud and clear, conveying your message, hopefully, to not just audiences across the world, but those opinion makers who do and can make a difference. There are thousands upon thousands who have taken to the streets of Lebanon protesting against corruption, mismanagement, autocratic rule, and, of course, a government system that they say exacerbates sectarian divides within a community known to be diverse for centuries. Now, coming back to you, Van, as we talked about this, let's also take a look at the political front. How is the government responding to these kind of incidents taking place in the past 3 days? Is there any word? We do have reports of Prime Minister Hariri saying that he's not going to rule. Again, he's pretty much taken a step back. Then who would step in to address this issue?
What we know for now is that we haven't heard anything from the government. We have not heard anything from the government regarding what is happening on the ground. Apart from the Lebanese armies and the Lebanese security forces control of the streets to keep the security of everybody on the streets, we haven't heard of the government. The government is resigned. Yes, the caretaker government today hasn't said anything so far about these protests, about these clashes. But what we've heard yesterday from caretaker Prime Minister Saad Hariri is that he is no longer willing to take part in a future government that could be formed in the next few weeks. Nobody is sure what's going to happen. There was a word from the Prime Minister's office and from some other politicians that there could be some consultations later this week. And the name is circulating about a businessman with close ties to Saad Hariri and other political parties in the country. But that is just still a rumor today. Nothing clear of that sort. But in the days ahead, we might see more and more protests, possibly clashes, if there are no consultations at the presidential palace to nominate a new prime minister. Saad Hariri has said he is not willing. He would be willing if there would be an agreement with other parties that the future government would be a technocratic one and not a political one with the same political faces that the street revolted against, that the street protested against. So we are in a wait-and-see situation right now.
It is a very stressful situation, I can imagine, especially not knowing what is going to happen next, and especially when there is also violence breaking out. which wasn't seen before in those numbers. Let me welcome another voice here, another journalist joining us from Beirut, Mr. Hussein Ibrahim. Welcome to Newswire. Thank you for joining us. Give us an idea of what the sentiment is on the street after Prime Minister Hariri saying that he wouldn't want to take part in a future government again. I mean, there's some analysts are saying that this is also a form of, a classic Hariri tactics. What's your analysis on this?
First of all, Hariri is one of the politicians in Lebanon who the people took to the streets against them. He was the prime minister. Yes. Then he quit, and
could this possibly be the statement was used by Hariri to appease to the crowd right now, who are in a very vulnerable position, who are protesting against all ruling elite? Could Prime Minister Hariri be playing this tactic maybe to try and win them over again?
Of course, that is what is he doing? He's doing. He is trying to exploit the so-called revolution. There was a real revolution in the first days of the demonstrations, but now many political parties try to join those demonstrations and to say that they are not part of the ruling elite, and it's not true. That's not true. Some of them, and Hariri is one of them. Those demonstrators are chanting every day that all of them. And Hariri is one of them. Right. And in fact, Hariri is not just responsible for the 10 or 7 or 8 years he was in power, but also for the 30 years that they call it the political Harirism. So his father was first.
Right. Hold that thought, Mr. Van. I believe you want to add something to that.
Yes, please. Mr. Hussein, I'm struggling to understand right now whether you want Hariri, who is a corrupt politician and responsible for the corruption in the country, do you want him to be prime minister, or you don't want him to become a prime minister? I'm struggling to understand here. Do other political parties you're talking about want him or do not want him in power?
Mr. Ibrahim?
As far as I'm concerned, I think that you cannot bring politicians from another planet to Lebanon. So we have politicians. So they made this mess, and they have to clear it. They have to leave. They have to leave. They have to leave. They cannot get out of the. They cannot, they cannot leave the ship and say now bye. We are not responsible. No, this is not true.
No, but surely the answer isn't to recycle those who have already caused one of the most massive, sort of unprecedented protests or revolts in the country, right? Mr. Van, your comments?
I'm surprised. I'm surprised because today there are people who still believe that the politicians who are fighting amongst themselves, like yesterday they did on the streets of Beirut and in north of Beirut. These politicians, you want them to come back to power? You want them to come back to power because they have been sailing this ship into an iceberg. You are just saying, well, let them sail it, continue towards the iceberg, because they are people from this ship. No, Mr. Hussein, I'm sorry about that.
But Mr. Van,
if you think he's a corrupt politician, he should leave.
Right, but what would be the alternative? We're talking about a transitional government or a caretaker government. Who would step in? I mean, this is decades of mismanaged government rule by the same people, the same faces, if not the same faces, the same representatives, who would step in then?
Our constitution is clear on this. Our constitution is clear on this. The constitution of Lebanon says that when the government resigns, we need to have mandatory consultations at the presidential palace by the prime minister and the Lebanese parliament. Once a new prime minister is named, this prime minister with the parliament names a new cabinet. If this parliament cares about the country, they would choose people from outside this ruling class. And there are so many, like Mr. Hussein himself, like others like Mr. Hussein, who are not in the government. I wish for them to take power, and if they are concerned and experts in their fields, they would lead us into a reform, to reforming the electoral law in the country, so that we can have early parliamentary elections. And then
Mr. Hussein Ibrahim, let's get your take. Van, hold on. Let's get Mr. Hussein Ibrahim back on the line. Tell us what your take on this is. Do you agree that there could be an alternative than just regurgitating the same representatives who haven't delivered clearly?
Okay. First of all, I want to say to Mr. Van that I'm a journalist like you. I'm not a politician. So, and why I am saying that we need for now, we need the same people who are in power, because they have, under the pressure of the street, they have to make the necessary reforms to take the country out of this mess. And this is not this will not be an easy mission. And I think Mr. Van spoke about the constitution. The constitution in Lebanon was never applied by letter. You know, we have something like the letter and the spirit of the resolution. It's clear. It's right that the constitution says that the president has to name a prime minister after mandatory consultations of the representative of the people. That's right. But if he does so now, and it took like 10 months or 10 years to have a government, what's the point?
And that in itself is taking its toll, because the economy has come to a standstill. The situation has come to a standstill as thousands are on the streets protesting. We've run out of time, so we'll have to leave it at that. Mr. Van, Meguerditchian, and Hussein Ibrahim, thank you so much for speaking with us on this, highlighting the issues right now on two completely different points of view here, whether the same government can be reformed, the same people could represent now the people's point of view, or that a complete new generation of the ruling class needs to be inculcated from the people's voices. And for that, we've come to the end of the program. We'll have to wrap it up here. We will see you next week with more stories and analysis from Newswire. Till then, goodbye.